Welcome to Polygon Wood. It was named that because that's the shape it was. This wood that existed here was a preserved area of forest in the midst of farms that surrounded. And it was land that was owned by the Belgian government during the First World War. There was an army training facility here. There was a horse race course in the middle, so sometimes it gets called like race course wood, things like that. But there was a butte, a hill, right in the middle of Polygon Wood that was used to catch the bullets because there was a firing range here for the Belgian military. And so those all became very prominent locations that got talked about quite a bit during the battles that were fought here. And like a lot of the Ypres salient, there were multiple fights here over the years of the war. Specifically, I want to take a little bit of time to talk about some of the things that happened here during the first and third battles for Ypres. During the battles on the Ypres salient in the Great War, there were key moments. Moments when the Germans had an opportunity to break through the Allied lines, capture the town, maybe even press on to the Channel ports. And then who knows? Moments when the outcome of the war itself may have been on the line. It's in those moments that stories of heroism emerge. One of those moments took place during the First Battle of Ypres here in Polygon Wood. After the initial attacks by the Germans along the Ypres salient, they had secured much of the high ground that surrounded the British positions. This gave their artillery and machine guns a commanding position to pour fire into the front and the flanks of British and Commonwealth forces. The Germans bombarded their positions steadily and with a significant numerical advantage that in places was as high as 10-1. They launched a new series of attacks on October 23rd, 1914. Author Winston Groom, in his book on the Ypres salient, described the 1914 fight for Polygon Wood this way. He said, quote, "On the morning of the 24th, the Germans attacked with a mighty force that nearly brought disaster. A battalion of the Wiltshire Regiment was suddenly surprised and virtually wiped out by 3 battalions of Germans. With no British reserves behind them, the Germans suddenly had a clear way into Ypres itself. It was mid-morning when the news that the Wiltshire Battalion no longer existed came rushing back to the headquarters of Major General Sir Thompson Capper, commanding the 7th Division. Now, Capper immediately went to work. He urgently sent back for help to Haig's 2nd Division, which had been resting after the French relieved them the night before. Not only that, he started going around and mustering everybody on his own staff that he could find to throw into the gap. Clerks, servants, staff officers, runners, orderlies, communications men, horse tenders, drivers, and, according to one report, even a cook armed only with his ladle. That's how desperate the situation was here and how much they needed to hold to prevent the Germans from breaking through to Ypres. The night that followed was a vicious hand-to-hand affair with bayonets, gun butts, knives, rifles, pistols, clubs, fists, as thousands of men commenced murdering one another in the tall, sun-dappled forest of pines and firs. At some points, the bodies lay so thick on the ground that it was difficult for runners to pick past them to get word of the situation back to headquarters. By mid-afternoon, the Germans had been ejected from Polygon Wood. In the final stages of the First Battle of Ypres, there was a desperate last-ditch attempt by some of the elite soldiers of the German army to break through the thinly held British lines. A stand had to be made, and it was made by the men of the Black Watch here on the southern end of Polygon Wood. To this day, the place where they made that stand is called Black Watch Corner. The contemporary Black Watch history and other records describe the battle. Between 6:30 and 9 a.m. on November 11th, the heaviest bombardment thus far experienced by British forces broke out. As it lifted, a division of the Prussian Guard, ordered by the Kaiser himself to break the British line at all costs, attacked the front. Under cover of a bombardment, a strong enemy force drove back D Company and the 2 platoons of A Company that were stretched here at the southwest corner of Polygon Wood. C Company, under the command of Lieutenant Anderson, and in a strong point about 400 yards from the south and west corner of Polygon Wood, held out firmly. The effect of this was that it split the Prussians into small parties of 20 to 30 men, many of whom soon got lost in the woods. As they emerged from the back of the woods, the guns of the 41st Brigade Royal Field Artillery opened direct fire on the enemy at a range of 300 to 400 yards. The effect of this was devastating, and the German attack faltered. At around 3 p.m., a counterattack by the 2nd Battalion of the Ox and Bucks Light Infantry, supported by the Royal Field Artillery, destroyed the remnants of the Prussian Guard, and the line between the Menin Road and Polygon Wood was reestablished. At 3:30 p.m., 3 companies of the 1st Battalion, the Northamptonshire Regiment, supported by parties of the Black Watch and the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders, advanced from Non-Boshen Wood to retake the southwest corner of Polygon Wood. This corner is now marked on all maps as Black Watch Corner. Originally, however, it was the C Company strong point on the southwest corner of Polygon Wood that was given that name. Now, the next day, on the 12th of November, the day after the battle, the strength of the 1st Battalion, the Black Watch, had been reduced to 2 officers and 109 men. The 1st Battalion's Scots Guards, 1 officer and 69 men, and the 1st Battalion, the Queen's Own Cameron Highlanders, 2 officers and 140 men. These are units that arrived in Belgium with over 1,000 men each. That shows you how devastating the First Battle of Ypres was on the British Regular Army. Now, unfortunately for the Allies, they only held this area for the next few months. During the Second Battle of Ypres, the Germans regained this position and then they held on to it for the next 2 years. And during that time, like many other places on the line, they built strong defensive positions and used the high ground here to direct artillery strikes on the Allied salient. The next real fight for Polygon Wood would come in 1917. The British plan for what became the Third Battle of Ypres was a series of bite and hold maneuvers that would eventually lead to the capture of Passchendaele Ridge. They would advance behind a creeping barrage, which would pin down the German strongpoints until the attack was almost on top of them. Once they had secured the strongpoints, they would consolidate their position in that area, move their artillery up to be in a closer position, fend off any German counterattack, that's the hold part of bite and hold, and then repeat the process. Polygon Wood was one of the steps in that process. By now, it had very little in the way of trees, but was filled with German pillboxes and bunkers like the one you see behind me. The job of securing this ground fell primarily to the men of the 1st Anzac Corps. The area where we are standing was to be attacked by the 5th Australian Division. From right to left, entering the far side of Polygon Wood would be the 5th, 56th, 29th, and 31st Battalions. The attack itself began at 5:50 a.m. on the morning of September 26th, 1917. The official historian of the Australian forces described the creeping barrage as the most perfect he had ever seen, saying that it went ahead of the men like a brush fire back home. Soon they were upon these German strongpoints, and they took every one of them. For most conspicuous bravery and devotion to duty, when on 2 occasions our advance was temporarily held up by strongly defended pillboxes, Private Bugden, in the face of devastating fire from machine guns, gallantly led small parties to attack these strongpoints, and successfully silencing the machine guns with bombs, captured the garrison at the point of the bayonet. On another occasion, when a corporal who had been detached from his company had been captured and was being taken to the rear by the enemy, Private Bugden single-handedly rushed to the rescue of his comrade, shot one enemy, bayoneted the remaining 2, thus releasing the corporal. On 5 occasions, he rescued wounded men under intense shell and machine gun fire, showing an utter contempt and disregard for danger. Always foremost in volunteering for any dangerous mission, it was during the execution of one of these missions that this gallant soldier was killed. Eventually, the Australians made their way here to the butte, which was covered with German defensive positions. They were able to take the high ground, and for the next several days, they fought off furious German counterattacks at this position. After about a week of fighting, the Germans finally gave up and fell back to their next defensive line to await the next Allied attack. The Australians had taken the ground, but at a heavy cost. Between the 5th Division here in Polygon Wood and the 4th Australian Division fighting just to the north of here, they suffered nearly 6,000 casualties. And many of them are buried right here where they fell. One of the very first monuments that was placed anywhere on the Western Front was this one here on the butte, where we see the memorial to the men of the 5th Australian Division. It was placed here in 1919, less than a year after the end of the war. So here, right next to that butte that was originally placed as a way of catching bullets for the Belgian military as they did target practice here in the middle of Polygon Wood, they have placed the Polygon Wood Commonwealth War Graves Commission Cemetery. And this cemetery, probably more than any other that I've been in so far, is just filled with Australian graves. This was definitely one of the places the Australians were most heavily involved. And for the most part, though I haven't walked through the whole thing yet, all I've seen so far are Australian graves. And this is a really large cemetery. It's one of the bigger ones here on the Ypres salient. So as I mentioned, at the Menin Gate, the soldiers of New Zealand are not recorded among the Menin Gate or at Tynecott, but they are here in Polygon Wood, listed in their own memorial to the missing here in the new Butte Commonwealth War Graves Commission Cemetery.